Our next speaker is Andrew Newby, and he describes that his research is underpinned by history, but it also intersects with social policy, sociology, politics, and religion. And sources of his project, they also incorporate economics, literature, and folklore. So really, truly multifaceted. And he says that his academic passion might be described as connecting people, which means for him to strive to make historic connections between different nations and regions at different times, and to apply historical perspectives on contemporary issues. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Famine is my topic. Famines were a recurrent feature of pre-industrial Europe, persisting well into the later 19th century. The Great Irish Famine of 1845 to 51 saw around 1/8 of the population, that's 1 million people, die, and around a further 1 million emigrate. And it's given rise to vast amounts of academic and popular literature, and informs Irish identity up to the present day. By contrast, a recent economic history of Finland explained almost casually that in the late 1860s, Finland experienced the last known major peacetime famine, losing 1/10 of its population through starvation, tackling this catastrophe in a single sentence before moving on to brighter matters. One of the most renowned Irish economic historians, Cormac O'Groda, has often alluded to Finland in his own work, but in a limited way, demonstrating, I think, the need for more concerted interdisciplinary and international collaboration. And this research project, I think, is the first major study of these events from an external perspective. So what I've been doing recently is looking at some of the British attitudes to the famines in Ireland and Finland, especially in the light of the considerable fundraising efforts made by the British for the starving Finns in the 1850s and 1860s, compared with what you might call the mixed response of the British public towards the Irish famine victims. We see quite different responses, often conditioned by religious or racial prejudice. The Irish, Catholic and Celtic, therefore associated with anti-modern attitudes and fecklessness, were often seen largely as architects of their own problems and a burden on the British state. The Finns, Protestant and at least potentially Scandinavian in the flexible racial league tables of the time, were constructed as largely innocent victims of European events and, moreover, able to help themselves, or at least learn to help themselves, if they were given some charitable aid. So the historical examination of these famines in the 19th century has clear relevance to social and political debates in the 21st century, as was amply demonstrated recently at a Nordwell Centre of Excellence seminar where we looked at the long-run perspectives on international welfare and poverty. The division of deserving and undeserving poor, seen in the mid-19th century, have their modern equivalents, and the Archbishop of Canterbury recently bemoaned what he called was the quiet resurgence of the seductive language of deserving and undeserving poor. These issues apply not only in discourse around domestic welfare policy, but also in debates over international aid. The inclination towards charity or the donation of aid on the part of an individual, society at large, or the state is conditioned by historical and cultural factors. Reactions in Britain, for example, to recent natural disasters in Haiti and Pakistan differed considerably. The debate around deserving and undeserving poor, albeit crouched in different terms, has also become more prominent as states seek to come to terms with the recent global recession. In European states, this has been particularly noticeable in discussion over the future of welfare systems. And in addition to questions of aid and charity, many of the arguments which are being used in relation to the financial crisis in the Eurozone, especially the situation in Greece, resonate strongly with discussions and debates about racial and ethnic characteristics and issues around also the economic interconnectedness of states and regions. And this also took place in the 19th century. For example, one factor behind the British interest to provide charity for Finns in the 1850s and 60s was to redevelop trade relations which had suffered as a result of the Crimean War, or the Åland War. Broad security issues in the modern world also have their historical precedents, and the famine years can be used to illustrate this. The British response, again, to famine in Finland was partly conditioned by residual guilt over the war of 1854-5, and the bitterness with which the Finns then regarded the British, having previously been on friendly terms. And the modern phenomenon of disaster diplomacy can therefore also be seen to have a historical basis. I'm thinking, for example, after the BAM earthquake in 2003, I happened to be in the States, and there was a lot of discussion about whether American intervention in terms of charity could help repair some of America's reputation in the Middle East. And finally, in this brief presentation, I'd like to raise the idea of global migration. This came up this morning also, in the face of natural and other social calamities such as civil wars. And this has again become a security concern. As I hinted earlier in the opening paragraph, the case of Ireland in particular can elucidate from a historical perspective the way in which immigrant communities can organise politically on a global scale. This type of historical analysis in turn can help in the planning of strategies to manage, I don't know if that's the right term, the migration of displaced peoples or understand the dynamics of immigrant groups. So I don't place undue faith in the power of historians to inform our politicians or influence governments directly. History itself is, of course, highly politicized, and anything can be cherry-picked from history to justify almost any type of policy. But I do believe that we abrogate our responsibilities if we fail to engage with contemporary public discussions and at least seek to refine and deepen the often superficial commentary which can pass for debate in our media. Thank you.